as I think Phil mentioned, we can't seem to turn off the faucet in some parts of the state. I'll talk about that here in just a little bit. But before I do, I do want to look back at last weekend and uh, talk about we've had a number of the of events in the weather weirdness category. That goes without saying this season, more than normal. We usually see a lot of these, but especially this year with spring freezes, drought, heavy rain, you name it, severe weather. Well, we had another one to put there, and what's something we rarely see. And for those of you who listen to me and so forth, a lot of times I talk about Canadian origin air masses and the impact that they have on us here in the Great Lakes region. And of course, most people, if I mentioned that, they would know right away. 99% of the time, we're talking about in the summer, probably a break from heat and humidity with cooler and drier air that moves in from northern latitudes into the upper part of the upper Midwest and brings us actually a nice, pleasant change. Of course, the opposite or potentially the opposite is true if we deal with this in the wintertime and maybe have some colorful language to describe a cold air mass that comes in the middle or latter part of the winter. But regardless, most of the time we talk about Canadian air masses and their movement into the region. It's to cool things down. Well, we had an example last weekend of the opposite of that. And if you think back about what you experienced, and I'm sure some of you probably remember this, on Saturday and Sunday, we got a burst of really warm, call it hot air. We got back up above 90 again with a very warm weekend. It was hazy to boot, but this was a piece of the air mass that was out over the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia, Western Canada, that set all the records. And the good news was that the upper air feature that led to that, a big ridge, it basically flattened out, and we only got a really a glancing blow. But still, because of that, if you look at the weather map, we actually, a piece of that air mass actually made it into the upper Midwest. And you can see here, the red line here with the semicircles, this is a warm front, and it came out of Canada. Again, it's not a cold front. It's not what we typically see. There was much warmer air. That's the lower left-hand side here. These are surface temperatures. Most of these maps were taken from Saturday morning, if you're wondering about the time frame here. But we had really hot air up over the Canadian prairies, even up into the far north part of Canada, and it moved because of a big trough over the eastern part of the U.S. That's the upper air there. About the same time, it actually was able to move south into the lower 48. So again, one of the things we rarely ever see, again, thinking about a warm front and warm air blast out of the north and out of the high latitudes. One last thing about it was because of forest fires and the dryness and drought and heat, et cetera, there are a number of forest fires out in Western Canada and actually the Western U.S. for that matter. But we had smoke from fires in British Columbia and Alberta actually make it all the way above this ridge and then southward down into the lower 48. And then on the lower right-hand side here, this is a product which looks at the smoke concentration in the atmosphere over the entire atmosphere. Turns out we had a layer of smoke between 3,000 and 7,000 feet above the surface that moved through this weekend. So if you're wondering why the sunsets or the sunrises looked particularly sort of colorful, or a lot of haze that showed up, and it showed up after a very bright, brilliant blue sky late last week. This is the reason why. It's actually smoke all the way from the western part of the continent. So all those things were related to that big event out in Western North America, but we only got a glancing blow from it. Well, in terms of the week itself, with that warm air over the weekend, our mean temperatures for the week were above normal state and region-wide. You can see here generally from 3 to about 6 degrees Fahrenheit above the normals for the week. So a fairly warm week. A lot of that was during it was both the daytime and the nighttime. Precipitation-wise, it depended on where you were. With 7-day totals now, this does not include last night's precip. This only goes through yesterday. But you can see some fairly decent precipitation, especially across the northern half of lower Michigan and also areas of upper Michigan, while the far southern part of lower Michigan, where we had all the heavy rain the previous week, was drier than normal. So again, like we've seen many times this season, it was location, depends on where you are. But I think one of the important things was some of the really dry areas in northern lower did pick up some meaningful or significant rainfall. We have to be grateful for that. And there probably will be more coming, as it looks like here in the forecast. Our soil moisture levels here on the left-hand side, this is plant extractable water in the top 3 feet. And you can see it's generally somewhere in the 30 to 40 percentile relative to the total available. But I think the more important graphic here is on the right-hand side. These are percentiles of the moisture in the plant extractable moisture in the top 3 feet relative to history. And what it shows, what it suggests is that after all of that dryness and in some cases drought conditions here, we are, in most of the lower peninsula, we are back up in the mid-range. In terms statistically, where does this right now conditions with soil moisture rank relative to the past? We've climbed back up. Remember we added so much water, or we added a great deal of water to the profile. That's important. There are a couple exceptions to that. You can see portions of the Thumb and the Saginaw Valley regions are still showing some brown and oranges, indicating below normal soil moisture. There was less water, less precipitation there. There's also a couple of pockets in northwestern lower Michigan that also remain dry. But this is a big change huge change from where we were just 2 weeks ago towards wetter conditions. So that is a good sign here as we look ahead here over the next few weeks. Degree day totals with the warmer than normal week, we added in most cases at least 100 base 50 units, some cases pushing 150. And on the right-hand side here, these are seasonal totals beginning the 1st of May. Most all the state still remains ahead of normal in terms of accumulation. The surpluses are on the order of 50 to 150 units. So it's not huge, but it still is several calendar days ahead of normal, at least in terms of degree day accumulation at this point in a season. Looking ahead here, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And we've talked about the medium range forecast guidance. It seems almost like a repeated over and over basis that want to bring in a zonal west to east flow pattern across North America, and ultimately back to warmer or consistently warmer than normal weather here. And we never seem to quite get there, at least not for an extended period. And this is the latest example of exactly that. And I'm showing you here a forecast upper air pattern across North America for early next week. And you look at this and you'd say, well, hey, Jeff, that's anything but zonal. And you'd be absolutely right. This is a very, very unusually meridional or high amplitude, big ridges and troughs. And not only are there big ridges and troughs here, you can see there's a huge block with a split flow, a big ridge over Canada, and then a cutoff trough here over the Midwest. And those cutoff features here, like the one you see here forecast to form over the Mississippi Valley, those are very, very difficult features to forecast. They baffle meteorologists and have for a long, long period of time. The models don't handle them very well, but it's a blocky flow, high amplitude, and we're going to have areas with much above, much below type of temperatures, as well as precipitation with that. So the active pattern that we have seen over the last 1 to 2 weeks, I suspect probably is going to persist into a good chunk of next week. Again, this is Monday morning, and right now it's looking like next week, at least the first half of it is going to be pretty active once again. We will have Gulf of Mexico moisture up here. And so after the weather system we're dealing with right now goes through, we'll deal with something to our south this weekend, but then early next week looks like it could be active once again. On our weather map this morning, we've got an area of low pressure over lower Michigan with a frontal boundary. And this frontal boundary has been with us for the last couple of days. It started way up in the northern part of the state and has gradually eased and shifted to the south and east, and it's brought a lot of precipitation, fairly widespread precip. That precip right now, as you can see in the lower left, recent radar here, mainly confined to the eastern half of lower Michigan. It's on its way east and a little bit north of east here during the next several hours into the afternoon. So we will see continuing threat for showers and a few thunder showers here over the next several hours, especially again, southeastern lower Michigan. But gradually we will see that rainfall come to an end here later this afternoon and evening. Northern parts of the state, depending on where you are, will either turn fair and sunny and cool, or there will be decreasing cloudiness. A lot of the northern lower will be like that, but transitioning because we've got high pressure here just off to our north and west, and that's going to be the dominant feature here by later today and for tomorrow. Here's the weather map for tomorrow. Again, you can see the high pressure there. Beautiful day, beautiful conditions statewide here for virtually all of us. And the next weather system of note is this area of low pressure out over the central Great Plains. That's going to approach us, by overnight Friday into Saturday. And here is Saturday. You can see that at least for the southern portions of lower Michigan, that will lead to another chance for scattered showers and thunder showers. Now, right now, I think the best bet is that most of the precipitation with this weather system will stay south of Michigan, south of the border, but there will be a threat for some rainfall in the far south. Contrast that with northern parts of the state, sunny, beautiful conditions. Matter of fact, we're looking at a several day, 3 or 4 day sequence here for the northern part of the state of relatively cool, at least initially, conditions, but sunny, just gorgeous, low humidity, forage harvest type, decent forage harvest type of weather. It will be cool for the next day or two, relative few degrees below normal, but we will see temperatures moderate from highs in the 60s today and tomorrow back up into the 70s here by the weekend for most of the state, and then lows from the 40s and 50s back up into the 50s and 60s by late in the weekend and into early next week. So we will be cooler than normal, but we'll be moving back up towards normal. And again, depending on where you are, it looks like the next best chance for widespread precip will come probably late Sunday or Monday with that upper air change that I talked about with that big block. We'll have to wait and see how fast that sets up. But right now it looks as though the early part of next week could be fairly active for us with chances of rain almost on a daily basis. Given that, our precipitation forecast here for the upcoming week ranges from relatively light, less than 1/4 of an inch type totals in upper Michigan. Again, fair weather is expected for the next several days up there. But as you go south, precip totals increase to more than 1 inch across the south. Some of that is today, but a big chunk of that is expected here would be late in the weekend and then early next week. So again, a fairly strong north to south gradient here anticipated, even more precip as you move off to the south and west over the central corn belt. And that may continue for the bulk. I wouldn't be surprised if next week, given that upper air forecast we talked about. Potential evapotranspiration rates with a moderating temperature trend here are generally a couple hundredths less than the normals here, but generally range from around 14 hundredths to about 17 hundredths per day on average. So a little bit near to a little bit below what we would typically see for the second week in July. And then moving off into the medium range time frame here, we see and again, I could use these same briefings that we've had for the last couple of weeks because it looks very similar. The upper air pattern, though, that is forecast, and the 6 to 10 day and 8 to 14 day outlooks are almost identical, but they call for a ridging feature here back out over the western U.S. That's what we've had for a lot of the summer thus far, and all of the heat and dryness, problems with drought. All of that is associated with this upper air ridge. In contrast, you can see a bit of a troughing feature here over the Great Lakes. That's important, certainly very important in terms of where we are relative to the anomalies. But in general, with a fairly strong west to east component of this, you can see warmer than normal mean temperatures are forecast. And we've seen that repeatedly. It just hasn't happened for an extended period of time, but that's still the outlook taking us through much of that third week of July. One change that is worth noting here that we did not see in the last week or two, and that is that blocky upper air pattern that we saw, and Michigan and the Great Lakes region being on the upwind side or the downwind side of that upper air trough. They do suggest above normal a fairly active storm track through the Ohio Valley up into the upper Midwest, and with that above normal precipitation totals. And you can see that also forecast here with a little bit of a bullseye, including portions of southern lower Michigan. So that's a change. So we were warmer than normal with no direction on precip. There's still drier than normal conditions expected off to our west, but now with this outlook, this moves us closer to the storm track, or is expected to be the storm track for the next couple of weeks. And that generally takes us into that latter 10 days or so of July. So today here, expect more rainfall in the southeastern part of the state with gradual clearing and turning fair and drier in the north and relatively cool. There's, again, it is a more typical Canadian origin air mass that's moving into the state here over the next 24 hours. And that sets up the stage for a beautiful day statewide here tomorrow. Fair skies or sunny skies, let's call it, during the daytime and dry. And then over the weekend, depending on location, a continuing threat for some scattered showers and thunderstorms across the south, especially as you get down towards the Indiana and Ohio lines, but beautiful conditions up north, fair, dry, a little bit warmer there over the weekend. And then the next weather system, the big, larger one, comes in late Sunday or Monday and stays with us then for a few days with an almost daily chance for showers and thunderstorms. And that is a lot like what the medium range is also suggesting, maybe a little bit of warmer than that, but it's pointing in warmer and wetter directions right now for the next couple weeks. And with that, I'll wrap up weather and introduce our next week's speaker here for the 15th of July, and hope you can join us then. Our speaker is Dr. Ehsan Ghani from MSU's Department of Biosystems Engineering. And as many of you know, Dr. Ghani is a drainage specialist, and he'll be here to talk about designing drainage systems to maximize profits. So don't miss that. And with that, I'm going to turn it back here to Paul and/or Phil. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Before I turn it over to Phil, there was a comment, kind of a question with Dr. Bird in the chat. In a Zoom meeting yesterday in North Dakota and Iowa, they were worried about drought maps. Yes. How bad is it out there?
It is. It's pretty serious, and they are with their annual crops. I was actually on a couple of meetings as well with colleagues from that part. They have been well. We've seen it repeatedly in our maps here on Thursday mornings. They have been below normal on precipitation back into late last year, and they don't get as much precipitation there in that part of the world. We're talking here especially about the northern Great Plains, but we are seeing problems with dryness spread south and east of that area, even into portions of the Corn Belt. But the northern Great Plains is really the area under, at least in the Midwest, is the area that's under the gun right now. And if they don't get significant precipitation here in the next week or two, there already are. There have been major crop impacts right now. Forage, pasture yields are way off, but the annual crops are also being hit hard, and there will be. It's pretty serious. The drought monitor has some of that area in a more than severe or worse drought, and again, you saw the outlook. It's not very encouraging for them for more water. So that is a serious problem, and will likely continue to be, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.